Hey gang, happy Halloween. I just thought I would throw this up there as something fun to do. This was a record I used to go to the public library like every week and take out and take it home and play it over and over and over and over. No true scary stories here, but just a bunch of really cool old stories. Again, it is a record. Well, because that's all we really had was records. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope that you have a wonderful and safe Halloween, and I will see you real soon for more of Uncle Josh's true scary stories. Happy Halloween, guys.
A long time ago, in a little town called Sleepy Hollow, there was a school teacher named Ichabod Crane. Now, Ichabod was a tall, skinny man who was quick to use a ruler on naughty scholars. Ichabod didn't live in the town of Sleepy Hollow. To get to his house, he had to ride his skinny old horse through the woods. He had heard stories that there was some kind of a ghost that prowled through the woods. Being a learned man, he put no stock in such tales. One night, Ichabod stayed in town very late at a party. As the evening wore on, after lots of food and lots of cider, the folks started telling ghost stories, and they got around to talking about the ghost in the woods outside of town. The story was that the ghost was a rider on a big horse that actually snorted flames and smoke, and the rider, he was a huge man who had no head. Finally, it got to be very late, and it was time to go home. Now, old Ichabod wasn't exactly scared, but then again, he wasn't too keen on riding through those woods this late at night. Well, he got on his skinny old horse and started off for home. As he rode through the woods, the full moon shone with an eerie light, making all kinds of spooky shadows. An owl hooting in the distance didn't make him feel any better, so he urged his old horse to go a little faster. Was it a dog? Maybe a wolf. Suddenly he caught a glimpse of a strange orange light, and it was coming straight toward him. Now Ichabod was terrified. He tried to make his old horse go faster, but the strange orange light was coming closer and closer. Could it be? Yes! It was a rider on a horse. The horse seemed to breathe smoke and flames, and now the schoolmaster could see better. The horseman had no head. In fact, the rider's head was carried before him on the saddle, and he was laughing. The craziest laugh you've ever heard. The headless horseman was coming very close to Ichabod now. He could feel the heat from the horse's fiery breath. They raced through the woods. The goblin was laughing. Ichabod was screaming. It was some wild scene as they raced along the little trail that led to a little bridge near the church. Just as they came to the bridge, the headless horseman suddenly stopped. His horse reared up. And what happened next is the scariest part of the story. The goblin rose in his stirrups and threw his head straight at Ichabod. The next day, Ichabod's old horse was found near his master's gate, but the saddle was missing. Later on, down by the old wooden bridge, they found Ichabod's hat, and close beside it, a shattered pumpkin.
Back in the days of sailing ships, people from all over the world were coming to America, looking for a new start in life. There was this one ship named the White Cloud, and it's her last voyage that this tale is about. She set sail for the New World with a full passenger list. Now, these folks weren't poor like a lot of the early settlers. They brought things of great value, like jewels and gold heirlooms. And while they tried to keep these things hidden, on a small ship, the word gets around among the crew. Now, the captain of the White Cloud had been a pirate when he was younger, but was given a pardon by the king because of the shortage of experienced sea captains. When he heard about the treasures on board, his thoughts turned back to the old pirate ways. He plotted with the crew to murder the passengers, take their belongings, set fire to the ship, and escape in the longboat. On the last night out of port, the murderous crew crept below with knives drawn. They spared no one. Every single passenger was brutally killed. Then a plunder began. Sea bags were slashed open. Trunks were bashed apart. Everything of value was piled on deck and divided among the thieves. After they had loaded the longboat, the captain set fire to the White Cloud, and the smaller boat pulled away from the flaming hull. Suddenly the wind shifted. The ship, now a mass of flames, bore down directly on the longboat. The villains laid to the oars, but it was no use. With a thunderous, fiery crash, the blazing ship split the small boat in half, and the evil crew was dumped screaming into the fiery sea, and all hands were lost. Since that infernal night, every year, on the first new moon of the fall, the flaming ship reappears. You can hear the eerie screams of terror from the tormented men as the blazing ghost ship nears the shore. She suddenly bursts into a great fireball, then disappears, only to appear again moments later. This happens 3 times. After the 3rd explosion, no matter the direction of the wind, the blazing sea-going inferno disappears over the horizon, always to the northeast, not to be seen again for a full year. Folks who have seen this ghost ship swear that they could smell burning canvas, rope, and human flesh.
I'm nervous, but why do you think I'm mad? My senses are very sharp, and above all, my hearing is extremely acute. Does that make me mad? Listen how calmly I can tell you the whole story. I loved the old man. He never wronged me or insulted me, nor did I desire his gold. I think it was his eye. It resembled a vulture, pale blue, covered with a film. It made my blood run cold, so I made up my mind to take his life. Every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. When I had an opening large enough, I put in a lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out. Then I put in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I did it. Very, very slowly, so that I could see him as he lay on his bed. Would a madman have been as wise as this? Then I opened the lantern so that a single ray fell upon the vulture eye. But it was always closed. One night, as I opened the lantern, my thumb slipped on the fastening. The old man sprang up, crying out, "Who's there?" For an hour, I didn't move a muscle. But I didn't hear him lie down. He was sitting up, listening in mortal terror. I opened the lantern so that a single dim ray fell upon the vulture eye. It was wide open. I grew furious as I gazed upon it, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it. So, you see, what you mistake for madness is just over-acuteness of the senses. And now there came to my ears a low, dull sound, such as a watch makes when wrapped in cotton. I knew that sound, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. The beating grew louder and louder. The sound might be heard by a neighbor. With a loud yell, I leaped into the room. He shrieked once. Only once. As I dragged him to the floor and threw the heavy bed over him. For many minutes, the heart beat on, but at length it ceased. The old man was stone dead. Now I took wise precautions to conceal the body. First, I dismembered the corpse, then took 3 planks from the flooring and deposited the remains. I replaced the board so cleverly that no human eye could detect anything wrong. It was still dark when there came a knocking on the door. I opened it, and 3 policemen entered. The shriek had been heard by a neighbor who called them to investigate. I smiled and bade them welcome and invited them to search. As the room had been restored to perfect order, I had nothing to fear. In my confidence, I brought chairs and asked them to rest, placing my own seat on the very spot beneath which reposed the victim. For a while, I was perfectly at ease, answering questions cheerily. Before long, though, I felt myself getting pale and wished they would leave. My head ached, and a ringing began in my ears, but still they sat and chatted. As the ringing in my ears grew louder, I talked in a louder voice. Now, a new noise came to my ears, the low, dull sound that a watch makes when wrapped in cotton. I gasped for breath and talked more quickly. The noise increased. I rose and argued about trifles, making wild gestures, but the noise grew even louder. I paced the floor. Will they never leave? I felt I must scream or die. Louder, louder, louder! Then I shrieked. I admit the deed! Tear up the planks! Here! And stop the beating of his hideous old heart! During a stroll through the countryside, I found myself on the road above a tunnel through which the railroad tracks pass. Down below was a tiny station which was maintained by the signalman who was standing near the great iron bars, which are the means of switching the tracks. I shouted down to him, "Hello down there!" Before he could answer, there was a vibration in the earth which quickly turned into a violent pulsation as a train roared out of the tunnel. As the train disappeared down the tracks, he folded his signal flag and beckoned me to come down. I found my way and joined him at the small building. He looked at me as if he was afraid. When I asked if anything was wrong, he said he thought he might have seen me before. When I asked where, he pointed at the red light at the mouth of the tunnel. I was quite puzzled as I followed him into the little house. Inside, there was a fire, a desk, and a telegraphic instrument, and that was all. I asked what he meant when he pointed to the red light. Instead of answering, he asked a most strange question. What made me call out, "Hello down there"? Why, those exact words.
When I asked why those exact words were important, he said he would tell me on our next visit. But please, he said, don't call out. The following night, I returned to the signal station and joined him inside. He told me that he had mistaken me for someone else. When I asked who, he said he didn't know for sure, because the person's left arm is always across his face as he waves violently with his right arm. Then he explained. One moonlight night, I was sitting here when I heard a voice cry out, "Hello down there!" I looked out of the door and saw a person standing by the red light, waving his right arm. The voice seemed quite hoarse as it cried, "Hello down there! Look out! Look out!" I ran to the figure, but just as I got to the place where it was standing, it was gone. I stood there in amazement, listening to the eerie wind blowing through the telegraph wires above me. Within 6 hours, there was news of a horrible crash at the other end of the tunnel. That was a year ago. A few months later, I saw the figure again, and the whole sequence was repeated. Within a few hours, a train came out of the tunnel and stopped at my station. I could hear the terrible cries as the conductor told me that a passenger had just suffered a violent death on board. The figure appeared again last week, but there has been no accident. I fear that this time it will be me. I tried to talk him out of his fear, but was unable to calm him, so I left. I came back the next day to find a train stopped at the little house. I walked up to a group of men and asked what was wrong. The engineer told me that the signalman was killed this morning, cut down by the engine. He had changed the light, but somehow did not jump clear of the oncoming train. The engineer said, "I saw him and blew the whistle. When he didn't react, I waved violently with my right arm as I covered my eyes with my left so that I would not see the disaster about to take place." I had to ask, "What did you actually cry out?" Then he told me his exact words were, "Hello down there! Look out! Look out!"
How old am I? Not nearly as old as I look. Been that way ever since that night when my hair turned white. That night? Well, I was driving home from a dance up near Ridgewater on this little road that leads to the big highway. It's pretty dark and winding for at least 10 miles, bumpy and curving through a forest so thick that the branches keep scraping on the sides of the car like they were trying to keep you from getting away. Suddenly, there's somebody in the road right in front of the car. I jammed on the brakes and stopped just in time. There was this shivering young woman. She had jumped into the middle of the road as if she could stop a car just by holding up her hand. She told me that she'd been in an accident and her car was a wreck. Then she asked me if I'd drive her home. She looked so cold and miserable. I let her in and even threw my white jacket around her because she was wearing a thin silk dress without even a sweater. Well, we started off for her house. But after more turns than you would believe, we pulled up in front of a very tidy little cottage with all of its lights turned on like a Christmas tree. She just sat there looking all worn out like she had used up every bit of energy she could spare. "Please ring the bell and see if my mother's home," she said. "The bell is on the left near the brass knob." I rang the bell, and the lady who answered looked like an older version of my hitchhiker. Before I even had a chance to speak, she said, "Don't say a word, just come this way." It all seemed very strange, but I followed her anyway. Up the stairs, down a hall, and into a very pretty room. A girl's room, I could tell. And on the table by the bed, there was a picture of a young girl. It was my hitchhiker. But all around the picture, there was a black border. Then the woman beckoned me to follow her back downstairs. I followed her down the stairs, out the door, and past the car. There was nobody in it. We walked a little further and came to a little private cemetery with a grillwork fence around it. We went in and stopped in front of a grave that looked newer than the others. The woman pointed to the grave and said, "My daughter. She was killed in an automobile accident last summer, and every night some stranger brings her home again." I was terrified. I turned away and left her there, but not before I noticed something sticking out from under the gravestone. I ran to my car and drove back home as fast as I could. It wasn't until I was in my own house and in my own bedroom that I discovered that my hair was white. Pure white, the same color as my jacket. That's what was sticking out from under that gravestone. Just like it had been there ever since the grave was first dug.
Welcome to Transylvania. I hope you don't find my castle too dark. You see, the light hurts my eyes. No, don't be afraid of my furry little friend. He won't harm you. Come with me. I'll show you a real vampire. Here, inside this coffin, is the terrifying monster of which you have heard. By day, he is one of the dead. But when night falls, he awakens from his catatonic state, changes into a giant bat, and flies away into the night, seeking the only nourishment on which he can survive. Human blood. Good hunting, my friend! But make sure you're back in your nest before daylight. And don't take any wooden stakes! If you are not afraid to go out on such a dark night as this, I will take you to visit the laboratory of my English neighbor, Dr. Frankenstein. You will find his experiments most interesting. Come, let us go. He is nobody's friend. But you have nothing to fear. The moon is not yet. Come, we must purchase this that the mad doctor must have to give life to his evil creation. giant body chained to the table. Dr. Frankenstein is about to raise the table to the open skylight to receive a tremendous electrical charge from a bolt of lightning. This will bring the monster to life. What closely? Look, the monster is breaking his chains. He's getting off the operating table. He's coming toward us. Come, my friend, quickly. I think we had best consider our visit over.
Fog-shrouded history of England, the Tower of London was known to its victims as the Bloody Tower. Many ghosts are alleged to haunt these dark, damp dungeons and torture chambers. It is a forbidding place, complete with a moat, Traitor's Gate, the Executioner's Walk, the Block, and the infamous Bloody Tower. In Britain's early days, traitors to the crown were brought by barge up the River Thames and docked at the Tower of London. Here they entered through the Traitor's Gate, never to leave this grim fortress. They were beheaded by a double axe wielded by the executioner, who always wore a black mask. One of Britain's greatest Elizabethans, the brave Sir Walter Raleigh, was executed here with a stroke of the vengeful axe. And his ghost still roams the evil darkness. Today, tourists from all over the world flock to the Tower of London to view the priceless crown jewels of Elizabeth II, which are on display in the famous jewel room. Protected by day by the famous beefeaters, and by night by the guards of the garrison stationed there, attempts have been made to steal these legendary gems, and all of them have failed. This is the tale of one attempt that ended in a night of terror. It is night. The changing of the guard is done, and there are no signs of life in the tower. But wait! There is a movement in the darkness in the crown jewel room. Stepping out of the shadows, we observe an evil-looking man, cloth cap pulled down over his face and mumbling to himself.
It was a good idea, Ernie, old lad. Hiding in the cupboard until everyone is gone. Now, I'll just be as quiet as a church mouse and get me little old glass-cutting tools out. Oh, sharp as a razor. Well, old Queen Bess, your sparklers are as good as mine. It's about time old Ernie Higgins got what's coming to him.
Slowly, the burglar began to cut into the glass case containing the crown jewels. His flashlight shone upon the riches that lay before his greedy grasp. Suddenly, from out of the darkness came a command.
Stop you a moment! Methinks your cowardly heart contains evil towards me royal lady, Queen Bess of England.
Ernie's hands froze as he slowly turned his head. He screamed. Standing before him was a terrifying apparition, glowing in the dark. The ghost of Sir Walter Raleigh was standing with his severed head held in his left arm. The panic-stricken robber screamed again and started for the exit, but A dark, ominous shape blocked his way. It was the royal executioner, dressed to kill. His black mask revealed a sadistic grin as he raised the huge, gleaming, two-headed axe. Early the next morning, the guards of the garrison coming on duty discovered a gruesome scene in the royal jewelry.
Hey, look! The bloke's head's gone! Blimey!
Good Lord, Corporal, you're right! The poor blight has been beheaded! Sergeant! Sergeant! Start a search of the tower at once!
The guards searched every nook and cranny of the dark, evil dungeons. But to this day, they've never found Ernie's head anywhere in the bloody tower.
Howdy, partner. Ready to go up to the old haunted gold mine? Climb on the wagon and we'll go have a look. Folks say the old shaft is haunted by the ghost of an old miner. Story goes that a long time ago, this here miner found a vein of gold. But before he could get the gold out, there was a cave-in. Well, sir, he spent the rest of his life a-looking for that vein. Never found it, but he was such an ornery cussin'. After he died, his ghost stayed in there, still looking and digging. Okay, here we are. Whoa! Who there? Sure is a creepy old place. Well, we're coming this far. Might as well go on in. Sure is dark in here. I'll just light this lantern. Don't pay no attention to them little bats. They're more scared than you are. Come on. Oh, it must be the giant black raven that stands guard for the ghost. Now, I'm more scared of him than he is of me. Hold on. What's that? Shh. Don't make a sound. Him. That's the old miner's ghost. I'm gonna blow out the lantern. Sounds like he's coming closer. I don't like this. They say he can be mighty mean with that shovel. Shh. Now it sounds like he's just around the bend in the next passageway. We better get out of here. Come on. Run! Run! Hurry! Hurry! Jump up on the wagon! Get up! Get up!
It is now 56 years since I experienced 10 minutes of the most horrible fright, but ever since then, I tremble at unexpected noises and am afraid of the dark. On that fateful day, as I was walking on the street, I met a friend to whom I was deeply attached as a youth. but he seemed to have aged much more than I. His hair was quite white, and he walked with a noticeable stoop. He apparently noticed my surprise, for he told me of the misfortune which shattered his life. He fell madly in love with a young girl and married her, but after only a year, she died suddenly. He was so affected that he left the chateau and never returned. Now he asked me to do a great favor for him. There were some very important papers in his bedroom desk in the old house. So important that he would trust no one but me to go for them. He gave me the key of the room and the key to the desk, both of which were locked on the day he left the house forever. The 2 packages of letters and roll of papers were to be found in the first drawer on the right of the desk. Since he was less than an hour's ride on horseback, I readily agreed. The weather was glorious. I cantered over the turf, listening to the birds. I entered the forest and walked my horse. When I reached the house, I was shocked by its condition. The open gate drooped on its hinges. The walks were overgrown with grass. The house itself was badly in need of paint, and the shutters drooped sadly. I finally got the door open and entered. I climbed the creaky old stairs and recognized the door described by my friend. The room was so dark, I could distinguish nothing. My nostrils were offended by the disagreeable moldy odor. The room was in total disorder. As my eyes became accustomed to the light, I found the writing desk. I opened the proper drawer and began searching for the documents. As I searched, I seemed to hear, or rather feel, something rustle behind me. Then another slight movement sent a disagreeable chill over my skin. As I was about to pick up the 3rd packet, I heard a long, painful sigh just over my shoulder. I leapt up like a madman and turned about. A tall woman, dressed in white, stood gazing at me. Such a shudder ran through my limbs that I nearly fell backward. Then she spoke. "Oh, sir, can you save me, cure me? I suffer frightfully." She held out a tortoiseshell comb and murmured, "Please comb my hair. I suffer because my hair pulls so." I took the comb, then her long black hair. It felt as if I were handling snakes. I don't know how long I combed those icy, slimy locks. Suddenly, she snatched the comb and fled through a closet door. It was as though I had awakened from a horrible nightmare. I burst open a window and sprang to the closet door. It was closed and immovable. I had a mad desire to flee. Seizing the 3 packets, I dashed from the house, leapt on my horse, and galloped away. When I reached my lodgings, I shut myself into my room to reflect. I had almost convinced myself that I had been the victim of hallucination, when, by chance, my eyes fell upon my chest. Around the buttons of my jacket were entwined a quantity of long, black, slimy hairs.
For some people, a dare just can't be turned down. Little Charlie was like that. How he got to be 8 years old, I'll never know, because he was always doing fool things that other fools thought up for him. One rainy night, we were huddled in the leaky shed that my father had nailed together, and we got to talking about the miser's gold. Little Charlie said,
I don't believe that old story. I think he was just a lonely old man and he didn't have any gold at all.
just to argue, I said, if he didn't have any gold, then why did some people think he did?
Because some people are just as dumb as you are, and so are all the people who say his ghost haunts the old house. I don't believe in ghosts, and even if there were any, I wouldn't be afraid of them.
Well, what could I say after that? In that case, why don't you just spend the night there and find out? Now, that was all I had to say, and I was sorry I said it. Little Charlie got up.
I'll take your dare, but you're coming with me.
Now, I don't take dares myself, but Charlie had made it a point of honor, and I do take points of honor. So that night we told our parents we were camping out and headed for the old house. The rain was coming down like it was trying to wash us away, so we were almost glad to get inside that spooky old place. We put our bedrolls on the bare, dusty floor and lay down. All of a sudden, the lantern blew out. Next thing we hear is groans in the next room, then footsteps, heavy footsteps coming closer and closer. The door opened. And standing there in the doorway was an old man with long, stringy hair and burning eyes. He was giving off a strange light, which was why we could see him in the dark. I shut my eyes because I didn't want to see him anymore, but little Charlie spoke up just like he was in the schoolroom. "Good evening, sir."
Have you come for my gold?
The old man whispered.
No, sir.
Little Charlie answered.
Then why have you come?
We came on a dare.
When little Charlie said that, the old man started to giggle.
A dare? A dare? Well, that beats anything I ever heard of, even when I was still alive.
I opened my eyes, and the sun was streaming in through the places where boards were off the windows. And there was little Charlie with a big bag in his hand. And you know what? That bag was full of gold. We never told a soul how we found the gold. But I will tell you this. After that, I never cared much for points of honor. And little Charlie swore that he'd never take another dare.